Today, we're talking about the differences between how Idaho and its residents appear on the surface and what they're actually like once you've lived here. If you're specifically thinking about the smaller towns in Idaho and maybe even Moscow, I think you'll be able to relate, and I hope this video will be extra insightful for you. Because if you've never lived in a small town, you'll find out that small town living is very different than what you're used to and not necessarily in the ways that you might expect. I can shed some light on what it's actually like to go from a big city in a different state to a small town in Idaho. We've done both. My wife and I have been the out-of-staters looking to relocate from a big city. And after living in a small town in Idaho for over a decade now, we've fully assimilated into the Idaho culture and lifestyle. We're raising our family here, and there are some things that I learned that aren't as I originally thought or as they might appear on the surface. If you're new to the channel, I'm Chris Carpenter. I live in Moscow, and I've been here for over a decade. Professionally, I'm a real estate agent, so it's my job to know Moscow and its people really well. Let's talk about first impressions. Idahoans seem like they don't like outsiders. You've probably seen bumper stickers saying, "Go back to California," heard stories or seen some maybe terrible comments in comment sections. But before you write Idahoans off, let me help you understand where they're coming from. Idahoans, including myself, really love Idaho, and we don't want to see the things that we love about Idaho erode. On the flip side, I happen to know that the reason a lot of people are relocating is that they see themselves as better aligned with Idaho and would be great fits here. So, will you be able to make connections, or will people oust you? It depends on where you move to, what you bring with you, and how you present yourself. Here's an example. There were some Californians who moved to a place outside of Deary, Deary being a small town just east of Moscow of around 500 people. A major difference from big city to small town is that word carries fast. In general, these newcomers didn't make an effort to connect with their neighbors, and in certain interactions, they were just downright rude when locals offered to help with different difficulties they ran into. Well, word got around Deary pretty quickly. Now, the joke is if you see these particular Californians in a ditch, just drive by. I know Deary people, and in reality, they're really kind people, so I doubt they'd actually drive by someone who needs help, but you get the point. What you say and do matters a lot. The smaller the town, typically the tighter the community is, and the higher expectation of making connections and helping each other out, because that's how rural folks around here roll. As you could imagine, there's not unlimited people in a small town. So don't burn bridges because you see the same people pretty much everywhere you go. I also said what you bring with you. And when I say that, I often mean politics or worldview. I kind of put people in two different camps when it comes to this category: refugees and evangelists. When I say refugees, what I mean is people who are fleeing from something to something else. Picture a Californian who doesn't like what's going on there, and they're coming to Idaho because they want to leave California and adopt what Idaho offers. Evangelists, on the other hand, see Idaho as maybe a beautiful state with a lot of cool things going on. They want to take what they have going on in California or New York or wherever else and impose that on Idaho. And as you could imagine, Idahoans aren't about that. At the same time, even though there are vocal people out there, don't let that put you off. People are friendly. More and more, I'm hearing that Idahoans don't mind other people coming here so long as they're willing to assimilate with the Idaho lifestyle and values. Another factor, Idahoans love their small towns and don't necessarily want to see them become sprawling metropolises. In many small towns, this is causing tension between the desire for low-cost housing that's been here for years and enables locals to thrive. I don't know how many times I've heard the question from people who have lived in Idaho for generations: "I don't know if my kids can buy a house here." Currently, the median income doesn't support purchasing the median home price. And whether it's true or not, people moving in are seen as the reason for expensive housing. And the result for people who have been in Idaho for years is they're questioning, are their kids going to be able to stay and buy a home here? You might have thought that Idaho housing was super inexpensive, and it's not necessarily, depending on where you're coming from. And speaking of expectations, let me tell you about some of the expectations versus reality that my wife and I experienced when we were moving to small town Idaho 10 years ago, some of them being the same things that I'm hearing now over 10 years after we moved. When I originally told my wife that we were gonna be moving to Moscow, Idaho, a place that neither of us had ever heard of before it popped up on our radar, she had a concept in her mind that it was gonna be like Troy, Idaho, which is just east of Moscow, that has less than 1,000 people. It's got one small grocery store, one small gas station, maybe a couple restaurants with sporadic odd hours, and not even a good coffee shop. Well, it turned out way better than what she expected because Moscow has a ton of great things. It's got an amazing food scene, all the amenities that you need. It's got the essential big box stores and tons to do, even though it's a little different than what we were used to. And a few other specific expectations versus reality is what we'll talk about next. In all honesty, moving to small town Idaho at the time, we didn't have a ton of expectations. There weren't a lot of great resources to learn about what exactly we were getting into, and I wasn't on YouTube researching like you might be doing. But we did have some questions. The first one being, would there be anything to do for fun? And I made a couple of other videos on this, but coming from Los Angeles with tons of different concerts and events and different things going on, growing up in Santa Cruz, California, where you can go to the beach and surf, you can hike mountains, you can go skiing pretty close by, and Natalie coming from Dallas, Texas, where there's tons of things to do like Topgolf and who knows what else, we had the question, what would we be doing for fun? There's a common misconception that Moscow's boring, that small towns in Idaho might be boring, but there's actually a ton to do here. But whether you want to hike, bike, ski, mountain bike, or attend any of the small town festivals that we have here, you can definitely fill up your schedule with a ton of fun things, and we've really enjoyed it. There is stuff to do, it's just different than what there is to do in a big city, and if you're anything like me, you'll actually really love the switch from big town activities to small town. Another question that we had is, would we find our people? And our answer was yes. We got plugged into a great local church. I go to an awesome gym with a bunch of my buddies and have made some great connections there. And I've met some phenomenal people just through working in business here locally. And that's not all. We've encountered some really pleasant surprises of things that we didn't even know to have expectations or questions about. The first one is local food sources, and this one might be super unique to Moscow, but around Moscow, there's tons of small farms and people raising animals that locals have access to get some of the most healthy meats and produce around. I actually just went to a farm just north of Moscow with the kids the other day, and it was after this guy's commercial harvest season, and I heard that he had a time of gleaning, which we drove up there and I talked to him, and essentially he said, yeah, feel free to go through my strawberry patches, pick all that you want, and it's free. I was amazed by it. The kids and I, we filled up 2 quart jars with delicious strawberries, probably the best ones that I've had. They were smaller, but absolutely delicious. And we grabbed some lettuce and then talked to him, and it was absolutely free. We left and headed home. It was awesome. Locals are resourceful and help each other out a ton with projects, equipment, or if you might get into a bind. Another thing that I never would have thought about, and maybe you have, but I was pleasantly surprised by, is the commute times. You can get almost anywhere in Moscow in 10 minutes from corner to corner of town. A funny impact of the short commute times is what I like to call Moscow time. Because people think they can get anywhere in approximately 5 minutes, often people end up being late to things because they leave essentially when it's starting. And we found that when people live outside of town, maybe even 15 or 20 minutes, which might have been a very normal drive time or even a short drive time in a big city, people actually end up planning a trip to go visit friends, or if they live out of town, to go to the store just 15 minutes. Another thing that I absolutely love about Idaho, Moscow specific, is the people here. They are salt of the earth people. I've been able to build deep connections and lasting friendships, many of which have changed my life. And if you're thinking about moving to Moscow, let me know. This is my number. Call, text, email, or scan the QR code. We can hop on a one-on-one Zoom call or phone call, whatever you want, and get introduced. And if you've enjoyed this video, either of these two videos is the next one to watch.